The 11 o'clock news, I'm Alan Jennings. In breaking news this hour, former BBC Radio Solent presenter Richard Cartridge has died. His family says he passed away following a short illness. Alex Dyke will be reflecting on the broadcasting career of Richard Cartridge in his programme shortly. Council leaders in northwest England are calling for more clarity on new coronavirus restrictions, which came into force in some areas at midnight. The measures ban people in Oldham.
Thank you very much, Alan. Yes, this is terribly shocking news for us at BBC Radio Solent this morning, as I'm sure it is for you. I was just thinking in the news, and this is going to be difficult. I really loved Richard, and I thought, I haven't got anything prepared to say, so I thought, what would be the first words that would come into my head when I thought of Richard Cartridge? And the first word was kind. The second word was funny. Then I thought gentle and loved. Richard was such a kind, funny man, and he, like all of us, has had his ups and downs through his life, but the last few years have been particularly challenging for Richard health-wise, and he was just so chipper about it. And every week when he would come in to record his Sunday evening show, he'd be making everybody in the office laugh. Such a kind man, and for me, he will always be Mr. Radio Solent. I'm just beyond saddened by this. So if you would like to text or email a tribute to Richard, we'd like to keep them for his family. And you can do that by, and we'd like to pass them on to his family too, of course. You can do that by texting 81333. Please make your first word of your message Solent. We don't want your text going somewhere else in the BBC, so it's 81333. Please start your message with the word Solent, and you can text that number or email alexdykeshow@bbc.co.uk, alexdykeshow@bbc.co.uk, and Dyke is D-Y-K-E. We are going to continue with the show and the theme. But if you want to come but it's impossible to escape this awful news that we've lost such a treasured member to the BBC Radio Solent team in Richard Cartridge. So we will now set up a book of condolence on the BBC Radio Solent Facebook page. So if you would like to put a comment up there, that's absolutely fabulous, but please could you wait until we've got a picture of Richard and we've got all of the text properly on the page and published it. Otherwise it will get lost in other threads. But the team are working on that at the moment. Alex, so sorry to hear the news about Richard Cartridge. He was one of the mainstays of BBC Radio Solent. Such a lovely man, says Anne in Newport. And Richard was very fortunate that his warmth and his likability oozed out on the radio. He was, sometimes you meet people and they say, what are they like? They're a bit edgy on the radio, or they're a bit outrageous on the radio. And you often say, if you met them, you'd realise what a terrific person they were. But with Richard, what you heard on the radio was the real person. There was no act. What you heard on the radio, that kind, gentle person with that lovely voice, that was the person that really was the real Richard Cartridge. Now, Richard retired from BBC Radio Solent on the 7th of June this year. And I got a phone call a few days before that from Richard. He was battling some health issues, and he phoned me up at home and he said, I'd like you to host my farewell show. I will be the guest for you, Alex. I was absolutely... I was just blown away by that, and it was such a privilege. Here's a clip of Richard on the 7th of June this year.
Apparently my mum used to tell me if he was talking in another room, you could hear the rumbling, but not the words. So I got that baritone sound, and I am a baritone when I sing as well, by the way. Just as an aside, I don't know why I told you that.
Oh, don't worry.
I've always had, since my voice developed as a child, a young man, an adolescent, I've had this deep tone. So it's been a benefit.
So there will be various tributes to the big man of BBC Radio Solent, Richard Cartridge. What we're going to do now is we're going to play some of the music that Richard Cartridge picked in his final broadcast. The messages are coming in thick and fast now. We're going to set this condolence book up on the BBC Radio Solent Facebook page. There'll be a nice photograph of Richard, some text above it. You can put your thoughts there, but you can text us on 81333. Start your message with the word Solent, please. You can email alexdykeshow@bbc.co.uk, or you can give us a call. In the building at the moment, we've got Rose Lyle, who's producing the show. Katie Martin's still in, doing some work after Saturday breakfast. Kane Reeves has come in, and I'm in here at the moment. There may be other people in the building I haven't seen yet, and we're all in tears. Kane Reeves was so close to Richard. He produced the show with Richard, and they were so close. And I'm really feeling for Kane, who's just sobbing in our interactive area today, as he's actually now trying to build some tribute and get the playlist for some of the records that Richard picked. So I hope you're going to bear with us. This is a complete, it was a complete shock to us this morning to hear this news. Sad news, Alex, for Richard and his family and everybody at BBC Radio Solent. He had a wonderful, iconic voice. Thinking of you, says Diane in Portsmouth. Diane, thank you for that. Another one here. Barbara in Yeovil. Alex, I'm gobsmacked to hear the sad news that Richard Cartridge has passed away earlier today. Barbara. Such an all-rounder.
Hello,
we've got a fridge magnet from one of his shows. Listening to Richard and Sylve on the radio, you told Rose, in Yeovil.
And ever since Radio Solent started in 72, I think it was.
The real deal.
I was there on the radio with him, not with him, obviously listening to him and that. And I deeply remember both Richard and Sylve Willoughby and Sandy Jones, Nick Gerder. They used to have such fun together, and they really made our day as we were talking. And it was so lovely to listen to them and hear them and all the frivolity that went on. And it really set me up every day from Radio Solent. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit broken about it, because Richard, to me, he was like a friend, like a dear friend, as is Sylve and Sandy and Nick still. And I do hope that the family will be able to get over this as much as possible, and that he will go to a better place. I'm sorry, I can't say any more, Alex. But,
no, we're all shocked, Barbara. We're all feeling the same. He was part of the family.
Absolutely.
I grew up. My mum and dad would always listen to Solent, and Richard, he was the funny one. He was the one that I think also the younger people gravitated towards, because. I'm like you, Barbara. I'm shocked, but thank you very much for coming on.
Okay, it's so funny, but him and Nick, they really used to rile each other now and again. It used to be so funny, and we used to laugh away with them, with Sylve and obviously Sandy as well. And I just wish those three as well, if they're still listening, then they must be very, very sad as well, obviously.
Well, thank you very much, Barbara.
Give them my love one way and the other, and the family of Richard. I can't say any more, Alec, I'm sorry.
All right, Barbara, that's Barbara Barter in Bassett. Thank you, Barbara. If you'd like to call in, you can. 0808 100 3800. I was just sat here thinking of Richard, and I remember I was in the 80s. I was on Ocean Sound Radio. And so I had my own kind of regular radio show, and I was walking along Ryde Seafront once, and Richard Cartridge was coming the other way, and he was actually making his way down to the hovercraft, and he was too far for me to stop him and talk to him. But I thought, wow, that's Richard Cartridge. He was doing TV news at the time, and and he was on BBC Radio Solent. A proper celebrity, Richard Cartridge, one of the biggest things in the south. Richard Cartridge on his last broadcast. Alex, I'm feeling for everyone at BBC Radio Solent this morning. Such a lovely man. Apart from presenting great shows down the years, he came through as a caring, sweet guy, charismatic, and just a really, really lovely guy. And what a voice! A great radio personality. That's Richard Cartridge, loved by so many. Says Julie and Trev Hodges near Weymouth. If you've just switched your radio on, we had the sad news come through in the last hour that we've lost Richard Cartridge this morning. Alex, this is awful news. I have so many lovely memories of Richard from the early 70s and up to just a few months ago on BBC Radio Solent. He never spoke about his illness on the radio, but obviously we found out more when he retired, says David in Emsworth. David, thank you very much for that. Such a lovely chap, and as a regular listener, I'm going to miss him so much. That's from Paul in Fareham. Yes, Paul, because Richard had retired in June this year, but the door was always left open for Richard at BBC Radio Solent to come back, and I thought he'd be coming back from time to time and certainly guesting with me and on other shows and just having a good chat and a laugh at life. Ronnie and Lula, no words, just big hugs to all you guys. So sad to hear the news of Richard's passing. His Sunday evening show with Kane Reeves was such fun. Sending thoughts and prayers to his family, says Louise in South. Richard was quite friendly with, I don't know if it was Gary or John Walker, and he loved the Walker brothers. He could have got away with singing with the Walker brothers. Richard had such a lovely singing voice. We've got Richard's daughter, Lucy, on the line now. Hello, Lucy.
Hi, Alex.
Thank you so much for coming on. This is so raw. It was in the early hours of this morning you lost your dad, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. I mean, we haven't known for that long, but I feel that actually, everyone that listened to Dad and worked with Dad and knew Dad is part of his story, and he would want everyone to know, and he would also want everyone to know how much everybody meant to him. He was my dad, and like he was Claire and Robert and David and James's dad, but he felt everyone was his family, and he really meant that. He had such a big heart, as you know.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we are all in bits here this morning, Lucy. We really, really loved your dad. I mean, I never heard anyone say a bad word against your dad, Richard Cartridge. I mean, you're right. Such a big heart, such a warm person. Truckloads of likability, wickedly funny.
Yeah, he was.
And just so funny. I mean, even our last telephone conversation, and I'm heartbroken in the way that, we did the send-off for your dad on the 7th of June, and I was so privileged that he asked me to do that with him and for him, and then we spoke afterwards, and, we were going to have that cup of coffee.
Yeah.
But this...
I know. And he spoke so fondly of you, and I think, it's amazing all the kind things that people have to say. And it blows me away, really, the amount of people that loved him. And even though they had never maybe met him, they still loved him, even if they just listened to him. And he gave away a lot of his soul to a lot of people on the radio. So, he went through a lot, and I feel that, he's now out of suffering. I think he's suffered for a while with his change of life, I think, and he can now be at peace with that. But we can all be at peace with that, and we've all got hundreds of memories of him. And I'm lucky because I get to play back thousands of hours of him from when he started on the radio up until when he left. We all get to listen to that. And, not many people get that. So I'm really privileged.
The thing about your dad was he never, ever complained in the office or on air. he gave so much of himself, but the stuff that it was important for him that he could hold back on and not spread the pain and the suffering he was going through. He was such a class act. And the fact that everybody felt they knew your dad, there are a lot of people on the radio that have not got the X Factor. Your dad had the X Factor. Radio is all about communicating. And your dad had tons of it.
Yeah, I think that's probably what we'll miss the most is, you know, a room was lit up when he walked into it. And actually, even if it was just on the radio, the minute you heard his voice, it lit up the room. And that's what we'll take with us forward.
And how was he in the last few months? Was he enjoying, it was obviously tragically a short retirement, Lucy, but was he enjoying the summer, or was it all getting a bit too much for him?
I think this year's been difficult for everyone. You know, when he obviously going into hospital, the restrictions are quite tight at the moment, what with, you know, the pandemic and everything. So things were difficult. However, he was always positive. He was always laughing. He was always joking. Even, you know, in his worst moments, he was always there with a smile on his face. And I think that's what, you know, the nurses have said is actually, you know, he was cracking jokes right up to the end, I think, to be honest. And that's how we'll always know Dad, is that he was always positive, even when actually he could have felt sorry for himself. He didn't.
Yeah, and I guess you guys now have to think how lucky you were. We all had a bit of Richard in our life, and yeah, you had to share him, but you know, what a lovely, lovely man to have as a father.
Oh, where do I start, to be honest? I don't know what to say in terms of how I learn how to live without him. But all I know is that he'll live with me for the rest of my life. He showed me how to be kind. He showed me how to be thoughtful. He showed me how to, you know, to live in this amazing, positive way. And we've all had hard times, but, you know, whatever life throws at you, I now know that laughter is 100% the best medicine. And he taught me that.
Yeah. And he dished out lots of that on the radio and really did make a difference to so many people's lives, lifting their spirits. He's such a class act. Lucy, we won't keep you any longer. We do want to send from everybody here at BBC Radio Solent, and I'm sure all the listeners, our love and best wishes to you and your family at this very, very difficult time. We've set up, we've put a tweet out, and we're working on a condolence book on the
amazing.
On the BBC Radio Solent Facebook page. Tell us why you've picked this song and the memories of this and your dad.
Me and Dad loved the Beatles. He brought me up listening to them back to back throughout my whole life. I think they meant a lot to him. And this song really resonates with me, with Dad. We used to sing it quite a lot in the kitchen, dancing about, or when we felt low, and we used to sing it when my brother passed away. So I feel like it joins us all kind of together, really. And I think, you know, it's my goodbye to him, really.
Okay, we're going to play it now, Lucy. Lots of love, and we'll speak soon. Thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, Alex.
Alex, such sad news about Richard Cartridge, and the Beatles sprung to mind for me too. And Sue in Millbrook, the song you're suggesting has been suggested by some other people, and we are going to play it. Morning, Alex. So sad to hear the news about the lovely Richard Cartridge. I used to listen to his programmes all the time. My daughter Claire was also a fan, and if we went out on a Sunday, we'd always get back to listen to him when he was on the radio. Our thoughts are with his family. So that comes from 008. So we know you've got a daughter called Claire, but we haven't got your number. But you know who you you are. If you'd like to give us a call, it's 0808 100 3800. Text go to 81333. Please make the first word Solent, or you can email me, alexdykeshow@bbc.co.uk. Martin on Hailing Island, very sad to hear about Richard. He was a very loyal man who I love listening to. I used to write to him on his show, and I've kept his replies. A lovely, lovely man. Wanted to talk was our boss, our big boss, Jason Horton. Now, Jason oversees many BBC Radio Solent, he oversees many BBC radio stations, including BBC Radio Solent, and several of our television stations too in the south. Jason, thank you very much for coming on air. As you've become busier and busier and busier, Jason, you've probably had less day-to-day dealings with the presenters at BBC Radio Solent as your net has widened. How well did you know Richard?
Well, look, I mean, over the last 10 years, really well, because although Richard had rejoined Radio Solent about a decade ago, he was always in every single week, wasn't he, as you well know. And although I never had kind of direct line management of him or produced programs in the way that so many other people who've already commented on air and on social media have said, he and I always used to chat each week, whatever day in the middle of the week he came in to prepare or latterly to record. And he'd stand in the doorway to my office, where my office is along that corridor, and just chat. And every single week he'd come, if the door was open and I wasn't busy, he would stand there, have a conversation, he'd come in, sit down sometimes as well. But I think that the thing that most echoes with what everybody else has been saying this morning was that I genuinely think he was the kindest man in radio and the most generous man in radio. And no matter what life had thrown at him, he always seemed to me to have such a positive attitude. And he would genuinely talk about radio, but he'd talk about his family, he'd talk about my family, and he would just want to know, what was going on. And I think that from that point of view, the fact that he was so kind and he was so generous and he had time for everybody, those are the kind of things that I remember about Richard.
Yes. Absolutely. I can echo all of that. Such a caring, kind gentleman. I think we're going to hear that again and again as the weekend goes on, especially the kindness and the gentleness of the man. But this business that we're in, people are very, very ambitious. Richard did some work at BBC National Radio, particularly at Radio 2, but that never seemed to bother him. He was so happy at Solent, so happy broadcasting to the south, and I respected him even more for that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I can remember he and I having a conversation about that, because I think that he was a network quality broadcaster. Of course I do, as so many of our broadcasters are across local radio. But he always said to me about how the South was, in his bones. He understood the audience to Radio Solent, and how can you not, after the best part of 50 years worth of broadcasting to this part of the world. But more than that, I think he really drew strength and enthusiasm for what he did from the interaction that he had every single day with the audience that he served where he lived. And to me, I think that was the difference. And I understand that you can have that kind of still closeness with the audience when you're on a national radio station. Of course you can have that. But it's not quite the same, as you and I both know, when you were broadcasting to a local audience. And that was Richard through and through. He was, I think somebody said this earlier on, didn't they? He was Mr. Radio Solent. If there was Mr. Radio Solent, it was Richard Cartridge.
Absolutely, yes. The thing about Richard, I think, Jason, was that he oozed personality without having to try. He was never trying to be the Mr. Big on radio. Whatever that X factor is, if there was anyone who was born to broadcast and to have a voice of authority, but also a calming voice to keep you company and make you feel like you were the only person in the world that he was talking to, Richard was the man, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was everybody's friend, wasn't he? And because he was able, somehow he was classless in that sense. He was able to talk to everybody. I always say to people who start off in our industry and who want to make it in our industry, the students, people coming out of college, people coming from community radio stations, that the very best of our broadcasters genuinely are on air who they are in real life. And I can think of all sorts of names from people that we work with every single day, and the people that work at Radio Solent South Today, all of those kind of places. But Richard really was that person. So there was no difference when Richard was standing in the doorway to my office having a chat as there would have been, a few hours later or a few days later when he was on air. And that what you see is what you get thing. I know sometimes it can be a bit of a cliche. In Richard's case, it absolutely wasn't. It was the honest truth.
Yeah. And of course he was in, radio has changed so much. It's always shifting sands, but when there wasn't much choice, when there wasn't much selection, and you only had radios 1, 2, 3, 4, and BBC radio, no commercial radio, it was like all of the South was tuning in to Richard. So he's been a friend, Jason, to so many. So my final question would be to you, do you think by this time next week I could be doing this show in the Richard Cartridge studio?
Well, look, those kind of things are always so important to consider, aren't they? And, we definitely have to think one way or the other about a way in which we can remember Richard Cartridge. And if it's the name of a studio or the name of a room or a building or whatever it might be, or something that thinks about how younger people can get into broadcasting and into radio, something that I think there has to be a Richard Cartridge legacy. And I think it will be, down to, our colleagues and friends at Radio Solent and across BBC South to begin to think about how we might do that.
Yes, that would be lovely. Thank you very much, Jason. We'll speak again soon, but for now, thank you very much.
No worries.
That's Jason Horton. Jason's my boss, my big boss, and we've been on the phone, off air, and Jason really wanted to come on and say something about the big man of radio in the South, the kind guy, the gentleman. And we are taking your calls, and we're looking at your texts, reading your texts and your emails, and playing some of Richard Cartridge's favourite music up until 2 o'clock. It's time now for the news, and I think we all know what will be making headlines.
From the BBC Sounds app, on your smart speaker,
playing BBC Radio Solent,
and on your radio.
The sound of the South is
BBC Radio Solent.
The Midday News, I'm Alan Jennings. The death has been announced this morning of BBC Radio Solent legend Richard Cartridge. He'd been diagnosed with Parkinson's a few years ago. We last heard from him on BBC Radio Solent back in June, when he shared his memories of a lifetime in broadcasting and some of his favourite music with Alex Dyke. Richard was instantly recognisable from the sound of his rich, deep voice. He told us he inherited it from his father.
Apparently my mum used to tell me if he was talking in another room, you could hear the rumbling, but not the words. So I got that baritone sound, and I am a baritone when I sing as well, by the way. Just as an aside, I don't know why I told you that.
Oh, don't worry.
I've always had, since my voice developed as a child, a young man, an adolescent, I've had this deep tone. So it's been a benefit.
Richard Cartridge talking to Alex Dyke on BBC Radio Solent back in June. Finally, just recapping on the sad news reaching BBC Radio Solent, the death of former presenter Richard Cartridge in the early hours of this morning. We last heard from him on BBC Radio Solent on the 7th of June, when he said farewell to listeners in a special programme in conversation with Alex Dyke. It wasn't the first time he left Solent. As he explained, he left once before to join a commercial station in Bournemouth.
It wasn't solely for the money. I fancied a change, I must admit. I love Solent, though, and you'd expect me to say that, but I really mean it. I mean, with Solent, I've had more comebacks than Sinatra. But it was an offer I couldn't refuse, not only financially, but also from the point of view of doing something I'd never done, and that's work in commercial radio, which, as you know, Alex, is a very different kettle of fish.
Richard Cartridge there talking about his time with 2CR, Two Counties Radio in Bournemouth, the station I had the pleasure of working on as well, and another commercial radio I shared with Richard, Original 106, where he regularly teased me in my role as newsreader there, all of it good-natured, of course. That's the latest to 4 minutes past 12.
I was going to ask you for a couple of memories. Thank you for those, Alan. The thing I really want to get over, and there's no need to get it over because the whole world and his dog knows it, we are talking about a real gentleman, aren't we?
We are indeed. You mentioned the word kind, and I think that sums him up. He was always there with a laugh, and even when he was not so well, he had a smile on his face all the time.
Yeah. Well, the tributes, thank you, Alan, the tributes just keep on coming, and we've got some more coming. We've had a call from Sally Taylor from South Today, BBC South Today. She would like to say a few words. We're talking about Richard Cartridge. Obviously, the news broke this morning that we lost Richard in the early hours of the morning. We got the news shortly after 10 o'clock. We had it confirmed by his family, and it was in our news bulletin by 11. And we've been taking calls and reading out texts and emails. We're going to keep all of the texts. Kane is going to pass them on to the family and the emails too. Hello, Mike in Christchurch.
Hi, mate. I don't know how you lot are coping up there today. He was Solent. He was Radio Solent across the whole of the area. How you lot can keep it together. Well done on all of you, but rest in peace, Richard and his family. My condolences.
That's very, very kind of you, Mark. Do you remember the first time you heard Richard, or how you did you discover Richard, and then that got you into listening to Solent, or were you listening to Solent, and how long had you been listening to Richard for?
On and off, mate, all my life. I remember him at Solent. I remember him at Two Counties Radio. I remember him when he came back, and I think when he came back to Solent was probably about the time I started re-listening to Solent, and just yourself, him and the presenters, they're all wonderful. But yeah, brilliant presenter. Part of the family is probably, even though he's not my family, part of the family.
I get that, Mark. The wonderful thing about radio is the people on the radio can become part of your family. They can become your friends. And sometimes the relationship is a little bit one way, but with social media and people getting back to us on Facebook and email and Instagram and Twitter, that has become an easier relationship for people this side of the microphone. And Richard loved his listeners. He loved the fact that you guys, and he was never Mr. Big. He was not, oh, I'm on the radio and you're listening to me. He got it like it really is. You know, we're all in this together. We're friends. You know, Richard or I or anyone else doing radio without you guys listening doesn't mean a thing. You know?
Yeah, and he's always had the time to talk to you and spend that little bit of time to listen and carry on. He was such a, you do it as well. You do it as well, my friend. You do it as well. But he was there from the beginning for me with listening to radio.
Yeah, and Richard got a gig on radio when you had to have a great voice too. I mean, it was tougher in those days because, you know, in those days it was just as much about, and wow, what a voice. You know, he just had one of the best voices, and I'm so glad that you, and I can tell how cut up you are, Mark, and I'm so glad you've taken the time and trouble to call us from Christchurch this morning. Thank you very much.
All right, mate. I've got to move on. I've got to do some work. I'll catch up with you.
Thank you. Mark, clearly cut up. Martin on Hailing Island, very sad to hear about Richard Cartridge, Alex. Just such a lovely man and a true gent. Elaine in Gosport, I'm so sad to hear the news. I remember him with Sylve Willoughby. They had such rapport together. And what you heard was what you got. Keep your tributes coming. Another one of his selections for his final broadcast back in June. Right, let's go to the phones now. Sally Taylor is on the line. Morning or afternoon, Sally.
Hello.
Hi, thanks very much for getting in touch with us today. This is just an awful day for so many people across Hampshire, Dorset and the Isle of Wight. You guys go back years because you were on Solent a lot in the 80s, weren't you? Not just the TV.
That's right. I mean, Richard and I went back, 30 years. And I used to do the mid-morning show, sort of 9 till 12, at the same time as doing South Today. And Richard would do the following show, the sort of lunchtime show. So he would always come in onto my show and he'd talk about what was coming up in his show, except we never did. And that was the wonderful thing about Richard. You know, I could go on and on, warm, funny, intelligent, witty, very quick, and that was what was so lovely about working with him. Just for those few moments of the day, I used to live for those few moments of the day when we could get together in the same studio and just have banter. And he was genuinely kind man who always thought of the other person and not himself. And I've heard so many people say this on the radio with you this morning. He never put himself at the centre of anything. He put everybody else at the centre. And the one person who was the most important person to Richard was the listener. And I think, you know, a lot of us as presenters forget that sometimes, but he had this ability to interact with listeners, to be genuine with them, and he had an honest interest in what they were saying. He wasn't dismissive in any way. He was a wonderful person, and it was only last week, actually, that I sent him a card, which, you know, I hope he got and I hope he read. And because, you know, right up until the very last day, he would always be in the newsroom, and he'd always smile, and he'd always say, "How you doing?" and we'd have a bit of banter. And it was just wonderful. I mean, I miss him enormously, and everybody will miss him. And, you know, my thoughts are with his family. What you might not know is that Richard used to present the late South Today. So we had when I joined, we had our evening bulletin, South Today on television, was at 9:30. And occasionally Richard would do that. So I would be doing South Today, and then he would do the late. And we had such fun because he loved it, but he hated it at the same time because it was completely different from radio. And the one thing I'll never forget over the years, because he used to, you know, have sort of jet black hair, and one day some grey hair started to creep in. He said, "What do you think, Sally? Do I go silver? Or do I stay with the black?" And I said, "Go silver." And he did. He eventually did. And it was just one of the lovely things about him, you know, and we'll all miss that. And I'm sure, you know, his great friend, Phil Molyneux, who was on the radio around about the same time, they were a double act together, and they were just great. I mean, what can you say except we miss him, we love him, and our thoughts are with his family.
Absolutely, Sally. And the one word there were several words coming through as compliments to Richard today, like gentle, funny, loyal, but kind. That is the word that everybody has used in text, emails, and people talking to us today. A kind man, a kind soul.
It's a rare quality. It comes out with people on occasions and certain things, but for somebody to be like Richard, the kindness was there in absolutely everything that he did. I mean, even just stopping people and talking to them and saying, "Are you okay?" I mean, he could spot these things. He could almost see into the heart of people, into the soul of people, to be able to say that something was wrong and see that it was wrong, and then spend some time with that person, whoever they were, strangers. He had a kindness which, it's a rare quality. And I'm so proud that I was friends with him, which is lovely.
Absolutely. And Sally, just before we go, not the easiest of lives. He lost a son. He was diagnosed as being bipolar. He was coping with Parkinson's disease. So he had a lot of worry in his own life, but he could still spread nothing but happiness in everybody else's, and never complained in the office, did he?
No, he didn't. I mean, over the years, it was a rare occasion if he ever said anything about what was going on in his own life. I mean, occasionally he and I would have a chat about certain things, but it was a very private chat. And again, he would never complain about it. He would just say, well, this is what it is. I thought you should know. And he would say that, and he'd just be very matter-of-fact about it and say, well, I'm having a good life and I can't complain. That was the thing about Richard. I go back to what I said at the beginning. He never put himself at the centre of anything. He always thought about other people, and that was certainly true of his private life as well. He didn't want people to know, or he didn't want to talk about it, and he certainly never complained about it.
Sally, thank you very, very much for coming on and sharing those memories with us.
It's a pleasure. It's the least I could do for a lovely man.
Thank you very much. From BBC South Today, our very own Sally Tate. Pretty recent years. Fernham Hall in Fareham was one I remember. Anyway, I participated in his games on air as well. Loved his shows. Please accept my sincere condolences and convey my love and sympathy to his family. God bless Richard. And we're thinking of him. That's from Raymond James Bowman of Alton. Formerly of Horndean, he says in his message. Thank you very much. Loads and loads of texts. Alex, we can't forget that Richard Cartridge loved the Shadows and played in a group called Shadowland, says Alan in Totland, so maybe we'll get some Shadows on later. Alex, I listened to Richard's programmes for years and years and years, right back when he used to be on with Sylv. They would be absolutely hilarious with their chatter and banter, says Richard in Chichester. Alex, so sad to hear about Richard Cartridge and the passing of Richard today. What a lovely, lovely man. He was a one-off. And I would always put my sewing away and just listen to him. And I'm in tears this morning. Love and hugs to his family, says Barbara in Havant. Richard, you're such a sweet man, she says. Thank you very much. Great guy, great sense of humour. And yes, he was friends with the Walker brothers too. You're right about that. God bless him and his family. Thank you very much. Now, I believe we've got Sylv Willoughby coming on the air. We're going to speak to Sylv in just a moment. Hi, Alex. I'm so deeply sad about the loss of our very own Richard Cartridge. And this, you're right there by saying our very own. Richard seemed to belong to all of us. He was in our life so much on the radio. Richard, I remember, did a Christmas morning day broadcast once. My mum was his number one fan, and we often talked about that broadcast. My daughter and I emailed him, telling him how lovely it was to hear him back on the radio a few years ago. A couple of days later, I had a phone call from Richard expressing his condolences when my mother passed away and wishing us well for the future. I'll love him forever. The compassion he showed us when we really needed it. Such a lovely, lovely man. That comes from Margaret from Havant. Margaret, thank you very much. Right, I believe we've got Sylv Willoughby on the phone. Morning, Sylv.
Good morning, Alex.
Had you heard the news, or did you get the call?
I was, if I can say, one of the privileged few to hear the news before it was announced officially. I took that as a privilege because I was on the list that the family wanted me to know. And I found that quite touching, really.
Yes, absolutely. How far back do you and Rich go? Because he was never Richard to you, he was always Rich to you, wasn't he?
Oh, well, it was Rich and Sylv, wasn't it? I think I was trying to remember, and I think it was around about 1980. That makes me feel old, doesn't it? But yeah, about 1980, because as you or other people may know, Richard inherited me from
Jeff Link, who used to present the very same programme. So when Jeff moved on, Jeff left me behind, and Richard had to pick me up, dust me off, and use me every day.
And this went on for years, and you would pop in for a couple of minutes. Well, you'd be on air for a couple of minutes, and it grew and grew and grew to, you had this, probably one of the, well, without a doubt, one of the most famous features ever in the history of BBC Radio Solent. At least 50% of our texts and emails have been about you two getting up to mischief and getting away with absolute murder on the air, Sylv.
Well, fancy you saying that. I can't think why. But yeah, Richard and I hit it off from day one, really. Obviously, I knew him before I joined him in the studio every day. But I always say, for a load of rubbish, it was it was so successful, if you like. We had no rehearsal. We ad-libbed everything. Nothing was planned. I literally didn't speak to Richard until he opened the microphone, because he was busy and I was busy, and I'd look at the clock and think, oh my goodness, I better get in that studio. And he'd open the microphone and he'd say morning, and off we would go. And it was supposed to have been about 3 minutes, but 10 minutes, 15 minutes, it just went on. And I think probably we could have filled an hour or two. But Richard was really naughty, because I knew his mind extremely well. I think I was his work wife. You see what I mean? I saw more of Richard than perhaps his wife did. And so I knew him, and I knew what he was thinking. So I'd only have to say something, and it led Richard into being naughty, or even vice versa. It was just such fun. And work, it wasn't work. It was just playtime at work.
And you
good fun.
You spread the happiness. Now, in recent years, were you and Richard so close? Are there going to be many regrets that you hadn't seen more of him, or were you popping round for a coffee quite regularly?
Well, yes, I did see him, but as life moves on and things progress, you don't keep in touch as much as perhaps you should have done. But I think we're all guilty of saying things like that about friends. But there was no falling out. In fact, whenever I saw him, it was like just picking up from yesterday, really, because he was that sort of chap. And he'd always come out with something that would make you laugh, and then I'd end up saying, oh, for goodness sake, Richard, and off we'd go again. It was just the way things were between us two. And I just want to say, though, that he has left such a legacy, and he was a modest chap. I mean, there were times when, yes, he loved the listeners, and he certainly loved the listeners, and he loved the adoration, and people would look and say to me, actually, God, aren't you lucky that you know him as well as you do, and you work with him? What's he really like? It was this they were asking me, and I was his wife, but they were in such awe of Richard. They wanted to touch him. Believe it or not, they wanted to touch him because they loved him. I remember us going off to France on our lovely listeners' trips that we used to do, and he was surrounded by all of the listeners all of the time. They would queue for his autograph. He'd give them as much time as they needed. And we would say, where's Richard? Where is he? Oh, he's out there talking to some listeners again. You know, he just gave himself 100%. Lovely, lovely chap.
Absolutely. And the words, I said this to Sally Taylor probably 20 minutes ago, the words we're getting are gentle, loyal, funny and kind. What a legacy.
And there's another word, naughty.
Yeah, well, you'd know that more than most, Sylv. You've picked a song. We asked you for a song that would remind you of Richard. Tell us the song you've picked and why you've picked it.
Right. Well, in Richard's heyday, way back when, there were lots of summer shows. There was the BIC, there was the Fernham Hall at Fareham, Shankling Pavilion, and they all had big stars for their summer seasons. So every year we went to each of these theatres saw the show the night before, and then we'd already invited the stars of that show to join Richard on stage of that very theatre to chat about themselves and the show and so on and so forth. I should... Have you got a minute?
Yeah.
Have you got, right. Yeah. I should say there was one, and I have told this story before, but I just love it, and I'll be telling it over and over again, I know. But we were at we were going to see the Sandown Pavilion and the Shanklin Theatre, but there were two shows, and so we had to go in separate shows, if you're with me. Normally, we would both go and see the same show. So Richard went to see one, I went to see the other. Then we got back together in the hotel and compared notes and wrote the notes, and we were up for hours doing that prior to the morning. And I always remember, it was in the days of a portable typewriter. You remember them, Alex?
Just about.
And we were in Richard's room working away. And then, it's about 1, if not 2 in the morning when I left Richard's room to go to mine. And the night watchman, or call him what you want, was walking by. And he just winked and said, "Busy night then?" And I said, "Well, we are working." "Oh, no, that's fine, madam. Your secret's safe with me." And I'll always remember that. I don't know whether he thought he knew what was going on or what, but that was the sort of thing that we used to get up to. Mm. And this particular song was at the Bournemouth Pavilion, because Richard and I chose to make more of an effort. We actually came together to sing this song, and we wore the top hat and tails in front of the full house. I should say that theatres were absolutely chock-a-block, queuing round the theatre at 8 o'clock in the morning. When we arrived, we were saying, "Oh my God, look, all these people." I mean, bless them, they were getting up at whatever time to be in the theatre for the 9 a.m. start of the programme. Oh. And on this particular day, we chose to do a song and dance routine to Lullaby of Broadway. And so whenever I hear that song, I always think of Richard and the Bournemouth Pavilion.
Well, Sil, unfortunately, we haven't got your version, you and Richard doing it, but we have got a nice version. Thank you for sharing those wonderful memories with us on air at this very difficult time. Thank you, Sil.
Even though it's a very sad time, I'm still smiling.
Of course.
He's such a great bloke.
That is the Richard Cartridge effect. Picked by Sylv Willoughby this morning, or this afternoon on BBC Radio Solent, a memory of Richard Cartridge, Lullaby of Broadway, that version from Doris Day. Alex, such sad news regarding Richard Cartridge, someone who was such a natural, kind and caring person, one in a zillion if you ask me, says Roger Sims. I remember seeing him after his concert at the Fernham Hall in Fareham. It must have been around 2004. He was so pleased to have photos taken after the show. I remember he was with his daughter Lucy, and we were with our friends Audrey and Eric. And it was a bit of a privilege to meet him shopping once in our local Sainsbury. The memory of his golden voice will always be there, says Richard. Richard, thank you very much for that. Alex, I knew Richard mostly from my dancing days at the Swan pub, not far from his house where he was living at the time. And not only did he have the most gorgeous talking voice, he had a lovely singing voice too. He wrote songs and was a brilliant singer with a guitar. We're going to really miss him, says Beryl. Richard Cartridge, who we are paying tribute to. If you've just switched your radio on, we had the very sad news this morning that Richard passed away in the early hours of the morning. What a shock to hear the sad news of Richard Cartridge's death, Alex. A talented, intelligent, true professional who never glorified himself in self-praise. He didn't have to. Alan in Totton, he didn't, Alan. He was a true star of radio in the South, and a nice guy. The big time didn't matter to Richard. He had his chances to be a national broadcaster, as our big boss Jason Horton said earlier. He just loved being in the South, broadcasting to the best bit of Britain. Keep these messages coming. They are just lovely to see. Louise in Southbourne, so sad to hear the news of Richard Cartridge. His Sunday evening show with Kane was such fun. Sending lots of prayers to his family. Louise, thank you very much for that. Have we got another caller coming through there? Rose? Yeah, we ready? Yeah. Okay. I think we're going to hook up with Alina Jenkins now. Alina now, of course, known as national BBC weather presenter on BBC One, but her roots are back here at BBC Radio Solent and South Today. And Alina sent me a text, so we thought we'd hook up with her. Hi, Alina.
Hi, Alex. Hi. It's such a sad day.
Yes, it is. How did you? It's awful and shocking. How did you hear the news?
My mother-in-law messaged me because she's a massive fan of yours, Alex, and she said, "Have you heard the news about Richard?" And I was just at my computer trying to catch up on some work.
Oh, we've lost the line. Right, we'll try and get Alina back. We've lost the line. I think we're going to phone her back. We were worried that might happen. Hi, Alex. Richard will be really sadly missed by all his family and all at the station. All the listeners, of course. We've got a signed photograph of him here at home. Says Peter in Gosport. Peter, thank you very much for that message. Oh dear, Alex, such sad news about Richard Cartridge. He was the reason I first became a Radio Solent fan. It was in the 1980s. He kept me sane with 3 young children running around. Latterly, I just adored his Sunday evening shows. I thought not only was he just great on the radio, but he's also such a very, very brave man. My dad had battled the same illness as Richard, so I knew what he was going through. The Radio Solent world, and the world in general, is going to be a less amazing place without Richard Cartridge in it. My sincere condolences to his family, says Christine Taylor in Weymouth. Christine, thank you very much. So, have we got great song? Have we got one of the favourites of Richard Cartridge? That's You're My Best Friend. Right, we've got Alina back on the phone now. At least we know with a telephone we've got a better chance of completing the conversation. So, Alina, how far do you and Richard go back?
We actually go back, Alex, years and years, because I went to school with his son Robert. So Robert and I were in Rainbow class at Fair Oak Infant School. And Robert was always quite a naughty boy, so I think Richard and his wife then were sort of offered in school, having to sort out Richard. So I knew him then. And then I think I must have been about 8 or 9, and I went to a Solent Road show. One of the great, outside broadcasts. And Richard was there, and I got up and I got to do a little bit, and I loved it. I thought, God, this is fantastic. And then when I joined Solent, when was it? Back in 2001. So I walk into the studio to do the weather, and I say, "Hi, Richard, you probably don't remember me, do you?" But with Richard's sort of cheeky sense of humour, it's like, "Oh, what do you mean?" But I said, I went to school with your son, and he also used to live next door to my aunt as well. So we've got so much in common. We've known each other for years.
Oh, it's such a lovely man.
He was.
Did you stay in touch with him, Alina? I mean, I know that life gets in the way and we all get busy, and, you're working a lot now for the BBC in London. Were you still in touch with him in recent years?
Not in recent years. I probably haven't seen him for about 3 or 4 years, for just those very reasons. And I think that's why I'm just so sad today, because we were really good friends. And when I left the radio and went, to South Today, and, we often would meet up for lunch, and, Max would come along, and I think he brought his son one day as well. And I went round to his house, for lunch. So we did stay in touch for quite a long time. And then just, as life just takes over, and it just really made me think, you must treasure your friends. You must try and stay in touch, even when it's difficult. But we stayed in touch on Facebook, and, message each other. But he was, Alex, I always think he taught me everything I needed to know about broadcasting. And what was so lovely about him, he always looked after the new people, because he knows you all have to start somewhere. But I learned so much from him. He was so generous with his time. He's like a mentor. And I always think he did the best interviews as well. And that's, if I'm ever doing interviews now, I think, well, how would Richard do it? Because he was just brilliant at interviews.
Yeah, that's lovely. That in itself is quite a tribute. And we work in radio and television, like theatre and like the arts. We have to work with some big egos because, you know, to a certain extent, you need an ego to do this job on many different levels. But there was no ego with Richard, was there?
No, he was so generous. He was so funny as well. And I just remember going in, to do the weather, and when Sylv was there too, and we would laugh, and it'd be so hard to try and be professional and do this BBC broadcast because he would just make us laugh so much. He was so generous with his time, not just with us, but with listeners as well. So, people were always calling in. He always had the time for them. He was so kind and funny and generous, and I think, this is why we're all so sad today.
Alina Jenkins, thank you very much for joining us, and congratulations as your career goes from strength to strength. Every time I see you doing the national weather, I shout to my wife, Alina's on. I'm so proud. I'm so proud that you've done so well. So that's lovely.
I missed you.
I miss you too. Thank you so much, Alina.
Bye, lovely. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye. It's 1 o'clock.
From the BBC Sounds app, on your smart speaker,
playing BBC Radio Solent,
and on your radio.
The sound of the South is
BBC Radio Solent.
The 1 o'clock news, I'm Alan Jennings. Former BBC Radio Solent presenter Richard Cartridge has died. His family says his death followed a short illness. Richard Cartridge's knowledge of music seemed to be unending, and he told us his passion for music started at a young age.
I grew up in Oakdale, which is not far from Poole, and then, due to circumstances, my father died when I was 7, so Mum and I had to move due to financial constraints. So we ended up in a static caravan in Powner at a wonderfully named place called Lumby Drive, and I had a great time there, and that's how I first got into music, through a friend of mine, Chris Redwood, a guitar player, who lived in the council estate across the road from our caravan park.
Richard Cartridge in conversation with Alex Dyke on the 7th of June, his last programme on BBC Radio.
Listen to this. This is an interesting text. It says, "Hi Alex, I'm holidaying in the New Forest and listening to your show. Being a northerner, I had no idea who Richard Cartridge was. But judging from what I'm hearing, he must have been one hell of a guy. Very sad," says Duncan, who is usually in Manchester, but currently in Brockenhurst. Duncan, thank you very much. That really does mean a lot to us. Alex, very sorry to hear the sad news about Richard Cartridge. We remember him when we were growing up, listening to BBC Radio Solent. He had that amazing broadcasting voice. Could listen to him for hours, sending condolences to Richard's family and friends from Sarah and Ian in Horton Heath. Alex, so sad to hear about Richard Cartridge today. We listened to him in Sylv back in the 70s. He was a fantastic presenter with a wicked sense of humour. A very sad day for all of us today. That's Sally and Terry in Mudderford. And this one says, our deepest sympathies to Richard and to Richard's family, as we remember Richard, and also to Sylv and her family. But I don't know who you are, but the text ends in 004. One more before we play another one of Richard's favourite songs. I'm sad to hear about the tragic news concerning the passing of Richard Cartridge. I fondly remember the days of Richard on national radio, and also his banter with Sylv Willoughby on Solent. Rest in peace, dear Richard. That's from Dal Harling. And Davies on the road again. Alex, we are saddened to wake up to hear the news of Richard Cartridge here in Canada. Our hearts sank tremendously. What a sad day for all the listeners of the BBC. He was such a big part of our lives too. Our hearts go out to the Cartridge family. We so enjoyed the recent Richard Cartridge final show, and looking forward to the memories coming through. We love listening to his fabulous stories and his favourite music. His favourite music was our favourite music too. Miss him dearly, says Diane McKay in Canada. I've now been joined in the studio by Kane Reeves, who in recent years probably became closer to Richard than anyone at Radio Solent, because he was working and producing the Cartridge Years on a Sunday night. And Kane, it's really weird here today. We are, 1 minute we're laughing about Richard and what he did, then we're crying.
It's if there's one thing I know Richard will enjoy, it's the fuss being made of him on air today, that's for sure. He was, I think you summed it up perfectly when you said the most gentle, the funniest. I've never ever known someone with such quick wit, Alex, honestly. He'd have you in fits of laughter from the second you see him to the second you say goodbye, and the most genuine man I think I've ever met as well. Never ever did he have a bad word to say about anybody, and just an absolute legend. I'm absolutely devastated. I can't express how much it hurts.
I know. When you came through, you were when we got the call. We got the message from Gethin Jones, who used to work at BBC Radio Solent in the 70s and 80s and had been here for years, one of the big players at the radio station. And he sent me a message on Facebook, so then we had to make the calls to the family, and you were the call. So I was finding some of the bosses, and so was Rose. You were the call I was dreading, and when you came through the door, and I could see that you had been sobbing, it broke my heart.
Oh, bless you. It was awful news to wake up to. I met Richard so I've been in radio for about 10 years now, and I met Richard when I was 17 on my first ever radio station. And it was a radio station called Play Radio, which broadcast just to Southampton. And he taught me I was brought in to teach him how to use a new bit of software. And I was really, really nervous because I thought, this is a radio icon across the South, and me as a spotty teenager has to come in to show him how to use a new bit of technology. And he was brilliant. We forged a friendship from then, and later on, when we moved to the Cartridge years to Sunday night, 6 till 8, and we would pre-record it. And that's
because it was easier on Richard.
Because it was easier on Richard. And I hate to mention the Parkinson's, but I think it's appropriate to, because there were times where it was a struggle for him to come in during the week to record it, so then we moved it to Sunday afternoons. And for 2 hours of radio, we would sit in the studio for a good 4 or 5 hours, just because, honestly, some of the stuff we would record, I'd have to listen back and say, we can't play that, Richard, we can't re-record that. And he was absolutely amazing. And there's little things that he'd teach me that will stick with me forever. And, I, for one, now want to make him proud. He loved you, by the way, Alex, absolutely adored your show. He thought you were, I think he saw a lot of him in you, if you know what I mean, and he absolutely adored it. And I just loved recording the Cartridge years with him, and there'd be moments where he would say little things that would kind of go over my head in the recording, and then I'd sit at home listening, and then phone him up and say, Rich, I can't believe you said that. If I knew that's what you meant, I would have taken it off.
I know, he was wicked like that. Thank you, Kane, for the compliment, because Richard really was one of my, to be absolutely honest, most of my broadcasting heroes are national broadcasters. Apart from Richard.
It's a great crime that Richard should be remembered up there with your Terry Wogans.
Yes.
Because what I like today as well is the different type of people that we've heard from as well. Young and old. People that he's touched on air. I went for a pint with him. I went round his house a few weeks ago, when lockdown measures eased. And it was so good to see him.
Was this the last time you saw him?
This was the last time I saw him. And appropriately, we had a good 3 beers with each other. And I know Richard, he probably could have handled a few more as well, bless him.
How was he? Because, you mentioned his humour was wicked. And one of the real sad things was his body was letting him down. But he was still just as quick, wasn't he?
Well, this goes to show how quick-witted he is. When he came in one week, he had a fall here on the radio station. And it was quite hard for all of us to see. And our boss came over to him to see if he was all right as he was getting up, and he said, I would like you to check the CCTV, please. I'll do it in my Richard Cartridge. I'd like you to check the CCTV, please, because I have a suspicion that Kane may have pushed me over. That, for me, summed up just how quick-witted he was. He was amazing. A true legend.
And generous too. I tell you what, we've kind, gentle, funny, loyal. We must add to the Richard Cartridge list generous, because he was happy to share the show with you. He didn't say, no, I'm a star. This is I've only got 2 hours a week now. I'll do it. You produce it. He shared the show with a young broadcaster.
Yeah, which I'll forever be grateful for, because it was just a start off of me coming in helping him press buttons, and then once we realised the conversations we were having off there were too funny not to go on air, it was great, and it's the most fun I've ever had on radio. I can't emphasise that enough. I must say as well, my thoughts are, how amazing was Lucy, his daughter, earlier.
Yeah.
You know, what a strong
by the way,
woman.
we must say the Richard Cartridge broadcasting heritage will live on, because Lucy's got a radio show coming up, hasn't she?
She is going to be starting a show on Isle of Wight Radio, which is amazing. So the Cartridge legacy continues.
And Richard would have been so proud.
Oh, he loved his children. He loved them so much. When I'd phone him, he'd always speak about how proud he was of Lucy and what she was doing. His sons, also, I must say, our thoughts are with his partner Shellen, who was a huge rock to him.
Yeah.
And I know how much he adored her, and she is such a lovely lady as well, and I can't imagine how heartbroken she must be
slim
today.
And with that famous voice. What a lovely man, says Pam. Alex, so sorry to hear about the passing of Richard. I have 2 of his shows on my MP3 player, and I never tire of hearing the gravelly but silky sound of his voice. So smooth. He's kind of got that David Attenborough voice on the radio. So calming, so soothing, so relaxing, says Brian in Worthing. Alex, Richard Cartridge will be sadly missed, but never forgotten. So glad to have listened to him for so many years. This is from Iris Reid. Iris, we were lucky to have Richard on BBC Radio Solent for as long as we had him for, and what a career. Sincere condolences to his family, says Iris. Glad he was, with you guys at the end, and you could have him on the radio sharing those memories. I cried then, and I'm crying now. Alex, I can't believe Richard has passed away. I was driving when I heard the news. I've been in tears ever since. Missed 2 turnings because I was listening to what you were saying on the radio. We used to love listening to Richard. He was just about the funniest man I've ever heard. Also, latterly, his evening show with Kane Reeves. They were so funny together. I'm just so sad he's gone. Sending all my love, says
just to hear the memories of Richard and
do it for Richard.
And do it for him, yeah.
Now, I've been here nearly 11 years. You've been here longer than me. How long have you been at Solent?
A long time. I started kind of just coming in on weekends, and then some of my first shifts were helping out on his afternoon show, and then on the Sunday afternoon show as well, taking calls and just getting to know him and his lovely nature that everybody's remembered today.
And that didn't take long to get to know Richard.
No.
There wasn't much to discover because it was all out there. You knew him through listening to him on the radio.
Yeah, and he was such a big name here, and obviously when you're new to the station, like Kane said, you can be a bit nervous and getting to know the presenters, but he was so kind and so generous. And, I've got the pleasure of working with him on a couple of outside broadcasts as well. And, outside broadcasts can be can be a bit chaotic at times, but he was so kind of chilled. He just had that demeanour of, it's fine, don't worry about it. And that I think that kind of permeated throughout whoever he was working with, so that was a really nice memory.
And I know today's been, I said to Kane earlier that 1 minute we're in tears and the next minute we're laughing through the memories of Richard and some of the the funny stuff he did on air. But how are you going to remember him?
Well, there's a couple of things. There's one lovely thing he said to me, and I'll try not to cry. Before I had my first baby, I think one of the last shifts I did here was working on his afternoon show, and he just looked at me and he said, Rose, you're going to be a great mum, and that will always stick with me. And to try and steer it to something funnier, it was just the memory of him being a massive Saints fan. And obviously he loved his radio show, and I don't want to dob him in, but quite often, if there was a Saints game on, and we'd have the feed on the telly. He'd be like, Rose, you couldn't sort out the TV feed for me. Or we'd bung a couple of long songs on so I can watch the game as well. So, yeah, great memories.
Yeah, love the guy. Thanks for doing a great job. And sadly, gone now, but will never be forgotten. And what a tribute this is. It's just beautiful. Thank you. God bless and good night, Richard. That's from Brenda and Alan. Thank you very much.
BBC Radio Solent Travel.
Right, let's take a look at the traffic and travel. New Road is... Bob Everett has just walked into the studio. These days, Bob is very busy on television. Bob goes way back at BBC in the South to his days at BBC Radio Solent. Bob, thank you very much for coming in.
Not a problem. Not a problem.
You and Richard were thick as thieves at one point, weren't you?
Well, I wouldn't say that exactly, but...
What, the thick or the thieves?
Neither. I deny it all, and so would he. But I came into Radio Solent about, early 80s, shall we say, and Richard was very much in his pomp in those days. And you used to listen to him, and you used to think, how does he get away with that?
Yeah.
Some of the stuff he did was really clever. He involved the audience all the time. I can remember a Southampton show one year where he had the audience in the palm of his hand. He was taking the mickey out of them. They knew it. He knew it. It was a sort of a little conspiracy between them. And if you can get that with the listeners, that is fantastic.
I tell you what, I think you've touched on something here. The brilliant thing about Richard on Air was some people do innuendo, it's obvious, and it can sound smutty, or carry on. Richard could do innuendo like no one else. He slipped it under the radar, and he was on to the next sentence while you would just realise what he'd said, yeah? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I know you've had Sylv on, and his double act with Sylv, which sometimes went from a standing start. She'd just walk in, sit down, and then it'd be, what? And they'd start from that. They'd make it up as they went along, and they had this sort of intuition between one another that enabled them to do this. And I think it's the only time, listening to one of their little double acts, that I've had to pull off the road because I was laughing so much. I couldn't. I was a danger to traffic, and that was what he had. He was great, and he was great in person, behind the scenes as well. Good musician as well in his own right. I mean, I went to one of his birthday parties, which was in a tent in Osselbury, and he gave a great set. It was really good.
Yeah. Yes, a terrific guy. Now, Bob, if you needed one word to sum him up, maybe it's been said, but the words that and I've been saying this all morning, loyal, gentle, funny and kind.
Yep, all of those. Mercurial. You can never pin him down on the air if you like. As you were saying, you never knew where he was going next, you know. Master of the single entendre, not the double entendre. He could get away with those as well.
Yeah.
Terrific. One of radio's great characters, I think, and greatly underappreciated. Don't forget, he also did a lot on TV in the 80s.
Yes.
He did the Cellar Show, the old Southwestern House, which was a sort of, it's a bit of a cornucopia of music, and John Sessions, I think, Tony Mail here was saying to me, also used to present that show.
That's right, yeah.
So it was, he was well known for his TV presentation. He did the old 9:25 bulletin as well for a few years.
Yeah, in the 80s.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
We're going well back now, though. But great character, and a lot of people who are tuning into Radio Solent, who've tuned into Radio Solent over the years, will miss him.
Bob, I know it's an awkward day for all of us, a difficult day for all of us, but thank you very, very much on that Sunday afternoon where Richard really did open up and talk about his life, and we had so many wonderful messages from people saying how much they enjoyed hearing what Richard had to say on that day, and now it's just tragic that so soon after his last broadcast we've had to pay tribute to Richard, which we feel privileged to do, but we're just so sad we have to do it. Thank you for your emails. Thank you for your texts. This one says, Alex, Richard, a lovely man. Apart from presenting great shows down the years, he came through as such a caring, sweet guy. Bags of charisma, wonderful sense of humour, and what a voice. That's Julie and Trev, just outside of Weymouth. Alex, the word that I first thought of when you were talking about words that describe Richard was joy. He was a joy to listen to. He brought joy to the listeners. And he had that lovely singing voice, too. We mustn't forget that. I doubt there's a dry eye in the house listening to Solent today. My deepest condolences to his family and his colleagues. That's Leona in Bournemouth. Leona, thank you very much. Paul Moxley sends an email. So sad and shocked to hear about the death of Richard Cartridge. That doesn't sound real. That doesn't sound possible, does it? The death of Richard Cartridge. It's too tragic to say. Please could you pay tribute to him with a song you played in June. Oh yeah, I think I know the one you mean, Paul. Paul in to all at BBC Radio Solent from Judith Walker. Judith, thank you for that. Alex, today's tribute to Richard is so moving. You guys are doing a great job. It's so apt, I think, that you were on air today for this. Says Diane. Diane, thank you for that. I kind of agree with you, because back in June, Richard called me up and said, look, I'm going to do my final show Sunday the 7th of June. I want you to do it with me. I want you to interview me. And I was absolutely floored by that. It was a real privilege to do that for Richard. And we all wished him a long, happy retirement. And tragically, that hasn't happened. But we're giving him a great send-off today. I think you'll agree. Alex, I'm so sad to hear of Richard Cartridge's passing. I loved his shows on Sundays. They were always filled with such great memories, fabulous music, and that voice. I love listening to him and Kane Reeves. What a double act they were together. What a huge loss to BBC Radio Solent this is. Sending love to his family and his Radio Solent family, you guys too. There will never be another like him. An epic man, says Laura Mellons. Laura, thank you. And yeah, just because Richard had retired, we didn't think we'd seen the last of him. We thought he would be, and we hoped that after all this craziness that we're living through at the moment had died down, he would be in with us quite regularly, coming in to guest on our shows and tell us great stories. Thank you for your emails. We haven't even scraped the surface of the emails. I've been recently diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and Richard is going to inspire me going forward, says David in Bournemouth. Well, we're sending you our love and best wishes, David. Thank you very much for that. Sean in Southampton phoned in. He had a great partnership with Seal Willoughby, and then with Kane Reeves. Richard just loved his show on a Sunday. I tell you what, Sean, that shows you the mark of a great broadcaster. Some broadcasters can be great on their own. Some can be great with an on-air partner. But Richard was so good, you could partner him up with anyone, and the magic would happen. So, thank you. I can't do all of your emails. I can't do all of your texts, because they just keep coming. We are going to send them all to Richard's family. We're going to send them all to Richard's daughter, Lucy. And then we will just let them read these at a time that is convenient for them. There will be another tribute to Richard on Monday morning's breakfast show. We've set up a condolence page on the BBC Radio Solent Facebook page as well. Lovely photograph of Richard. If you want to tweet about Richard, please include BBC Radio Solent at BBC Radio Solent in those tweets, so we can see them and retweet them or like them. That would be very, very kind of you. Alex, what can I say? Such a huge loss. And this has been a great tribute to the man. My deepest sympathies to everybody concerned, says Anthony Robinson. Thank you, Anthony. I will sit here and read all of your emails and all of your texts before I go. I promise. But I think just before we go to the news for 2 o'clock, and just before we go to Adam Blackmore, who's now got the tough choice the tough challenge of doing a sports show with all of this going on at BBC Radio Solent, we're going to leave the last word to the man himself. Next weekend, we will return to our theme of Sugar, Soul, Ska, which will tie in nicely with the bank holiday weekend next weekend, isn't it? With the mods and the scooterists who may or may not be around on the Isle of Wight. I'm sure some of them will. But obviously, I'm sure you'll understand why we had to change the mood of today's show with such big news. I'll be back tomorrow, following on from Tony Blackburn at 10 o'clock. Night, Rich. We love you so much. and we will never